I filed transfer on death on my home, bank account, and car titles. But Medicaid can still go after my home if I ever go into a nursing home on Medicaid. So how do I prevent this? Excellent question. So the thing about Medicaid is that the rules and what Medicaid can and can't reclaim after they've paid for an individual during their lifetime is very much dependent on the state in which you live in. So as you all know, I am an attorney who lives and practices in Florida. And as far as the home is considered in Florida, Florida utilizes, or Florida residents can utilize, a particular type of deed called an enhanced life estate deed, which is also known as a Ladybird deed. Very similar to a transfer on death deed, where the property remains with the person who it belongs to now, or who maybe originally bought it during their lifetime, or if it's a married couple, belongs to that married couple during their lifetime. And after the survivor on the current title passes away, then the property goes to whoever is named on the property as a beneficiary. This particular type of deed in Florida, the Ladybird deed, makes it so that the property does transfer immediately upon the death of the property owner. It stays out of the court process called probate, where assets have to go if they don't have beneficiaries listed on them, or if they're not in a trust. And once it transfers over to the new owner, again, immediately upon death, it is outside of any kind of reclaiming by Medicaid or Medicaid coming after it to get it in order to satisfy payment for previously provided Medicaid services. Now, Florida also has extraordinary protections when it comes to homestead property. So the Florida Constitution goes over homestead property and what that allows the residents of Florida to have in relation to that property, and it is amazing. In fact, Florida homestead property is one of the most protected assets of any asset. Not every state is the same. Different states have different rules with regard to homestead, just like they have different rules with regard to Medicaid. So it really just depends on where you live in order to determine what Medicaid can or can't do, especially when real property is involved, or in particular homestead property, which is obviously a form of real property, but it has special privileges attached to it based on the fact of it being homestead. So there's basically two things you have to look at here. One is the particular homestead situation in the state that you're living in. What does that look like? What does homestead mean in your state? And also the Medicaid rules in that state. Because this is where careful elder law or Medicaid planning comes in, because maybe the transfer on death deed isn't the right type of planning for you, especially if the state can make a claim against it or can come in and get the property sold to satisfy what they paid during the Medicaid recipient's lifetime, or to make payment to them to repay them for those services that they provided, or the medical services they provided. So if that's something you're trying to avoid and your state doesn't allow that with regard to the homestead, well, then you should meet with an elder law attorney in your state who may have other options, like potentially a Medicaid asset protection trust, or a different type of trust, or something else that could be available in your state, or which is a go-to for most people in your state if they are trying to preserve assets, or in particular preserve the homestead. And the other reason it's really important to find an attorney and talk to them is I've seen people do all kinds of things unknowingly that create a much bigger mess. One thing that I see happen with real property, homestead property in general, is trying to give it to a child, or just adding a child's name on the deed because they don't want to go through the process of paying someone to do a correct Ladybird deed. So they throw their child on there, not realizing that Medicaid's going to look at that as a gift. And there's special rules with regard to when you can give gifts and how much time has to elapse in order for you to not have to count that asset towards your countable assets when you're applying for Medicaid. Meaning, if you make a gift here in Florida, for example, and you do it within 60 months, 5 years of needing Medicaid, well, Medicaid's allowed to count that asset that you gifted and use it against you. And you'll have a penalty period where you'll have to pay out of pocket before you can actually qualify for Medicaid. So the point I'm trying to make here is the few $100s, or even if it's thousands of dollars, a few $1,000s that you might save in trying to do something yourself, often cost much more in the long run. And this is another really good example, because it's possible, because of the state you live in, the transfer on death deed isn't going to work to preserve the homestead, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something out there that does. And it's great that there's certain easy things that you can do on your own, like put beneficiaries on bank accounts, and if it's allowed in the state where you're in, put a beneficiary on a card title. That's amazing. These are simple things you can do on your own. You don't have to pay a professional to do them for you, but there's definitely times when things are worth paying a professional for their advice, and when it can mean potential Medicaid qualification, which can save, in Florida, $10,000 a month on average in long-term care, or it can preserve a large asset like a homestead property. It's definitely worth spending that extra money, so you do it right and you make sure that that asset is truly protected and the goal that you're trying to achieve does get accomplished. All right, so I hope this answers your question regarding possibilities for protecting homestead and when you're applying for Medicaid. And if you have any other questions regarding Medicaid qualification, elder law in general, estate planning, or asset protection, and you're in Florida, don't hesitate to reach out to our office. We're at Cause Law Office. The link is in my bio.